So your book, just so everyone knows, it's called Overwhelmed: Work, Love, and Play When No One Has the Time. I'm curious, what did you learn about our culture's obsession with busyness? Like any specific, like where did that come from? Why are we like this?
Yeah, no, it's such a good question. It was so funny because, the whole book started out with this challenge that I had 30 hours of leisure, and that men have 40 hours of leisure, this whole idea that we have more time. And I didn't feel that. And so I started looking at the research and, it's really interesting. The time use researchers will say, it's like, well, look, we're not working as many hours as we used to. And it's true. Like back in the 20s, if you were a steel worker, you worked 6 or 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. The whole labor movement has been about trying to get shorter hours. But that really misses the point, that's sort of an average of, lower wage workers who are not able to get as many hours. And then what's happening with like white collar workers is they're working more and more extreme hours. So you kind of get this average that doesn't really exist for anybody. And it also ignores the fact that a lot of the people on the low wage end of the scale are putting together 2 and 3 jobs. It's
Right.
not like they have all this more leisure time. They're picking up side hustles and gigs and other work. So I think that was one of the first things, is to recognize that the statistics that all these time use researchers were using like was wrong. Nobody lived that life. It was this
Right.
like mythical average. And then the other thing was just really understanding, like in the mid 20th century, in the 1950s, there were all these predictions that we were so much more productive as an economy, that we were going to get to this point where all of our basic needs would be met. And by this time in life, we would be working 15 hours a week. We'd be able to retire at age 38 and live these great lives filled with leisure and time to, learn Italian and
Yeah.
painting and travel. And I remember I talked to this one leisure researcher, and he said, I've spent my whole career trying to figure out what the hell happened.
Yeah.
So it is a really good question that in 100 years, we went from showing our status in the amount of leisure time you had, which was sort of the early 20th century, to in the 21st century, we show our status in how much we can cram into a calendar and how much we can share on social media about how busy our days are and how many things that we can do in a day, really to the point of exhaustion.
Right. Oh, 100%. I like that you use the word status there too. And what are some of the consequences of our, unsustainable always on culture? I mean, if this is the status that we're striving for today versus, the status of leisure, what are the like what's going to hit us in the face basically?
Yeah, so there's a couple things, and I'll just talk about three. The first is just in terms of health, that constant, constant feeling of being stressed out and busy, not able to take a breath, not able to like even have a moment to think. That has huge health consequences. Our bodies are designed to have what's called allostasis, sort of this stress and release. You gear up for a run, or you gear up for a big presentation, and then once it's over, you have this release. That's really how our body works best. But when we are busy and have this kind of hectic, always on feeling, we never have that moment of rest. So what's happening to our bodies is that they're finding it's like when you're constantly bathed in that stress hormone of cortisol, it's actually been linked to really serious health conditions like diabetes, obesity, inflammation, cardiovascular disease, even cancer. So that's the first thing to think about is stress, and the impact that that's having. And the other thing to think about is that stress does not only affect your health. There's research that shows that it actually is affecting our brains and our ability to think, and that it also works like a contagion. So you come home and you're busy and you're stressed out, that cortisol actually transmits to every single other person in your family,
Wow.
including your kids. And so I think that that's really something to think about, those health and stress effects. And the other thing to think about is, just in terms of work and doing effective work or innovation or thinking good thoughts or, coming up with the next big idea. What we're finding with neuroscience is that fresh ideas and insight only come in this kind of relaxed, diffuse mode. Our brain works on two functions, diffuse and daydreamy, and then this other one that's concentrated work. And that the ideas, the insight come in that kind of spacey, daydreamy kind of moment, which is, really why you get your best ideas in the shower sometimes. And so if we're constantly always on and on and on and in that concentrated mode and got to do, we no longer are able to kind of put ourselves in the position to have a new idea. So you're constantly trapped and stuck. And I guess that was the last point that I'd wanted to make. I'm doing some work with some behavioral scientists right now as we're trying to look at what drives overwork and work-life conflicts through the lens of behavioral science. And then we're trying to design interventions that people can try to use in their work and their organizations to see if that can help mitigate some of that work-life conflict. Can you be more effective at your work and get it done so that you can actually go home and it won't spill over, work won't spill over into your life? And will that help reduce stress and improve your health? And one of the things that's so fascinating about that really ties to the busyness question is that from behavioral science, they're finding that when we get in that hyper-focused, busy state, that this phenomenon, it's called tunneling, that your vision literally tunnels, your cognitive capacity for what you can think about narrows, so that you're really only able to focus on sort of the low-value tasks right in front of you. And so to really get that big thing done or think that big thought, that requires you getting out of the tunnel and sort of taking a breath and stepping back and getting that 30,000-foot view. And we're really, our workplaces are not enabling us to do that. That kind of busy craziness is leading to tunneling, which then leads to more and more tunneling. And because all you're doing is focusing on the low value tasks,
Right.
you're getting completely burned out and exhausted, and you're not getting your best work done.